I'm here with Bria Slaughter, and she's been a military spouse for 25 years. She's raised two children, and she's also been a part of helping other military families in their family readiness. And we're going to have a conversation today talking specifically to educators and administrators about what we can do, what we need to know, and what's important when you have students in your classroom or students in your building that are a part of a military family. That it's real easy to overlook it, to not even be aware of it, but this is a really special group of students, and we want to make sure that we're able to meet their needs in a way that helps them thrive and not just survive. So, Bria, as you hear that introduction, let's just dive right in. Like, does it matter that if I'm an educator or I'm an administrator, does it matter that this student comes from a military family? Like, is that something that I need to be aware of, or can I just look at them like every other kid? Or is there's just some really unique aspects to their journey that I need to be aware of?
Well, I think yes and no to that question. Yes, I think it's important to know, as with any student, what their background is, what their home life is like, where they come from. No, in that they don't want any accolades or any extra attention or to be treated any differently than any other student in your building. What you do have with military kids are amazing, resilient kids who view life from a very different perspective than other children on many different levels, just because of what their life is, because of what they know, geography. My son was in kindergarten when his dad was deployed to Djibouti, Africa. And of course, that was a funny word for a kindergartner, was Djibouti. But his teacher, they found Africa, Djibouti, Africa on the map, and they talked a little bit about that. And some of the teachers in the building didn't even know where Djibouti was. So that was just kind of a funny little joke, and how he was known in the building. They recognized him because his dad was in Djibouti, and they would all say Djibouti, and everybody would just laugh. So just little things like that that they bring to the table that are just unique and different. And it was very lighthearted. It wasn't always, oh, there's the kid whose dad is deployed. They were like, hey, your dad's in Djibouti with a D, and it was just a sweet little moment in the school at that time.
Hmm. It's like it's a real special way of helping him form his identity within the
Yes.
context of school that didn't make it to where the teachers felt like they just couldn't talk about it at all because they were worried about saying something because he might get upset.
Right, right. And you know, it's a strange for us, it was a strange situation because we resided in a regular civilian community while our kids were growing up and while my husband was deployed. And I think that's kind of something that's unknown in the civilian world is not everybody's living on an army post. 9/11 really changed the game for our military and our military kids and our military families. And if you were on a post or you're on a base, a lot of teachers are well versed in how to deal with military students because the majority of their kids, if not all, are military students. But when you are removed from a post or a base or a military community, you kind of are plucked into the middle of normal, which is good and bad for our military kids.
Mm. So that's something as an educator that I really need to know is that just because we're not near a base doesn't mean that I'm never going to have military children.
Absolutely.
And that if there's a child that just moved here and where he was near or where she was near a base, that he's actually coming into something new and it's not just a new school, but now it's a new school that's not surrounded by supports that a base will offer. They're just trying to figure it out on their own in a regular community.
Yeah, 100%. And not just military kids, military families, but government employees across the board. You have Secret Service, FBI, CIA. Those kids are living and thriving and growing and going to school in communities all across America. Again, a lot of people just think that's only Washington, D.C. or, a military post, and that's simply not the case. You have children who come from very unique homes because of their parents' jobs. They're very unique jobs in your community. You would probably be surprised if you took a poll on who has a connection to the military in any random school in the middle of Mount Juliet, Tennessee.
Mhm. Hmm. So, what are some things to be aware of when, I have a student in my classroom and his father or his mother, like they kind of got the rumblings that they're going to be deployed, and then that there's this time, sometimes it's super quick, and then sometimes there's a lead up to it, but then they're deployed. So
Mhm.
they are on the plane and they're gone. What are some things as an educator that I might need to know or understand, or some tools that I can have in my toolkit in the lead up to deployment and then once the parent is actually gone? Because that's going to impact how the child or the teenager shows up in my classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, I can speak as a parent and what was helpful to me and what kind of stuck out to me. And really, those kids are used to that. This is their life. I had one teacher who would almost just cry every time she saw my kids because she was like, it just makes me so sad. And my kids weren't sad. My kids had a dad that truly loved them, that was a great dad. And it wasn't the same situation of just an absent parent, an absent father, or an absent mother. They know they're loved. They also know that this is their dad's job or their parent's job. This is their calling. And they're right in there with their parents and all the support systems that their parents are utilizing and trying to grab from the atmosphere in the community. So just to have the parents or the teachers as a next layer of support was the most important to me. My kids wanted to go to school. They didn't want to be plucked out and, okay, stand up and her dad is leaving tomorrow, or they really didn't want a big deal. They really wanted to just fall in with everybody else. What was important and what was nice was when the teacher would shoot an email or a text message or a phone call and say, hey, I'm a little bit worried about so and so today. Billy was kind of having an off day, or is there something I can help with? And not communicating with them. It's really important that you kind of go through the parent and say, hey, how does this work for your family? Because every kid is different. You are going to get the kid that might cry every single day. And that mom might say, let them cry. Please don't ask them if they miss their daddy or if they miss their mom. Like, let them cry, let them get into school. They'll be fine. My kids, I was really fortunate. They rolled right into school, and because I kept the routine, it was important to keep the routine. And they just understood. They didn't know any different. It wasn't a first time for them. My husband deployed the first time my daughter was 7 months old. So she never knew any different. And then when my son came along, he never knew any different. That's just what life was to them. So, what might be unique to the educator is life to the student and life to the kid. And they don't know any different, like any other kid in any other situation.
Hmm, that's good. So using the parent at home as the connector to give you guidance on
Yes.
what's best for their child.
Yes.
And that's so good because, as parents, we are always the best expert on our children, and leaning in on that expertise. I bet it also reminds the mom or reminds the dad that they're not alone in this, having to carry it by themselves.
Absolutely. It was very important to know that I had teachers and staff at a school that had our back as a family. They were supportive of us when we couldn't be at school, when we were, gone for whatever reason, whether we got to go see him for a few days or he had come home and we were going to Disney World for the week. They were super great and super supportive in all of that, but mostly just the day to day, the day in, the day out, and sometimes kids, because they're kids, will manipulate. And if they're having a bad day and they don't want to be at school, or they're mad at their mom because they didn't clean their room and it was a normal, morning of just trying to survive and get to school. And then you get to school and everybody melts down, and the teacher says, calls and says, hey, I think they're missing their dad today. And I'm like, no, they're mad because they're 11. And, so what you don't want to do is give them a crutch and then
Mhm.
everything is, well, they're missing their dad or they're missing their mom. they're
Yeah.
still just 11 or 8 or, whatever the age is. So sometimes you just have to say, "Hey, buddy, buck up. We're gonna have a good day today, okay?" And just roll with it. And then if that continues, obviously they would reach out and say, "It's just not been a good week. We don't really know why." And, you do know why, but you still just press on through it and deal it as it comes.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of a statement that I often say is feel the feeling, but do the right thing.
Yes,
So you're acknowledging, wow, you feel this way. Maybe it's
right,
because you're being an 11-year-old that's not wanting to do something or other stuff that's going on, but
right.
feel the
And as
feeling.
we know, can accumulate into all the things, but it can't drive the bus. And we had a lot of those conversations at home to say, "Hey, I know it was a bad day at school today, or I know you don't feel like doing your homework, or I know you didn't do your homework, or whatever. But, dad doesn't really want to be gone either.
Mm,
And he doesn't want to be away from you any more than you want him to be gone. So the best way we can honor that space is to do what we need to do here. And then when he comes home, we're going to Disney World. We're not going to school for 5 days. So,
mm,
always give them something to look forward to. And the teachers were great at that too. When it came close to a homecoming or a visit or something that we could anticipate that the kids could look forward to, I always let them in on that. And it was always a, "Hey, how many more days is it till you get to see dad?" And you got a little smile and you got a little motivation. And then it was like, "Oh, yeah, I remember that conversation I had with my mom at home."
mm.
So that was helpful too.
Yeah. And what's great about that is that's just a reminder about the power of communication with the parent, because if you stay in communication with the parent, then you're aware of days and when's coming and what's happening. So then you know how to best respond and
Yes.
encourage the student in your classroom.
Yep.
What about like how do you handle those special days? Like, you know, uh, dad's and donuts day at school and dad is, overseas, or a mother daughter event or a mother son event. Like, how as an educator can you navigate that when clearly dad's in Djibouti and he's not coming for dads and donuts?
Right. I think like you would handle it with any other student that didn't have a parent. We were fortunate and we always had somebody show up, or it was me. And, my son would kind of laugh about that because he's like, "My mom's coming. My mom's my dad right now," or whatever. Just my kids were just champs at navigating that, because we always had somebody show up, but we also usually had somebody whose dad couldn't be there for some other reason. They had a work trip or, whatever reason might be. And we always kind of buddied them up together. The teachers buddied them up together. And that helped because it helped the kids see, "Hey, I'm not alone in this boat. Like, my dad is deployed, your dad has passed away or can't be here for work or whatever." Um, and we just kind of played it off of at the end of the day, it's just a day. It's just an event and it's going to sting a little bit, but you know what? You've got a dad that loves you and that's what matters. So just remember that your dad loves you, and I would remind them of that. The teachers would remind them of that. And we just kind of went on about the day. We didn't really make a big, huge deal out of it, for me and for my kids, because I felt like the bigger you made it, the bigger it was. And there were a couple things my kids just chose not to go. There was a daddy daughter dance, and my daughter just chose not to go. And other dads offered to take her, and she was like, "I just really don't want to go." And that was okay too. I was like, "Do you want to go do something fun?" And she's like, "No, I just really don't want to go. My dad can't be here, and I don't want anybody else to go with me." So that's exactly what she did. She stayed home, and that was that.
Hmm. So, so talking about it from the parent side, right? So you're managing all the details, you're being mom, dad, everything. Um, like, what are some things that teachers can do for moms or dads that are managing all the pieces while the other parent is gone? Is there anything that they can do that would be helpful to you as a parent, um, as you're raising the kids and trying to do all of the pieces while you're doing it solo?
Yeah, I think grace. Just extending grace. There was a 4-H project that didn't get done because it didn't get done. We were in the middle of all the things, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just looking at the parent binder, and I'm seeing that we have like a project that you were supposed to make out of recycled things.
Hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, it's not going to get done. Like it's it's not going to happen. And I sent an email to the teacher and she was like, I completely understand. It is not a big deal. We had not a lot, but we had some mess ups. As organized as we try to be, we still miss things. We're still human. And we do carry an extra weight of worry and burden and all the things that are going on. So as much as you're trying to do all this over here on this side and have your multicolored post-it notes and all the things, we still miss it. We still miss it. And I was extended so much grace so many times by teachers who said, hey, don't worry about that. Have him bring it, next week we've got some kids that are going to be absent. Just have him do it, that time. Or figuring out a plan B. And like I said, it wasn't anything that was regular. It truly just was a slip. I just missed it. So, yeah, grace, extending
Hmm.
lots and lots of grace.
Yeah. So I know part of what you've done through the years is you've helped support other military families. And so with that, I know you've probably seen the gamut of
Mhm.
highly functional military families and then families that are just struggling. They're just
Mhm.
really, really struggling. So what, especially that one of the parents coming home from overseas and they're bringing a lot of trauma back and there's just so much stuff. Like, what would it be good for an educator and administrator to really understand about the experience that their student is going through that they might not really grasp because they haven't had the family side view that you've had
Mhm.
supporting families, military families that might be struggling?
Well, there's a reintegration process for all of us that happens upon return. And, Hollywood does not get it right when they show the dad getting off the airplane or the mom and the kids are running to them and they hug and, then the lights go out and the credits roll and you just think everybody lives happily ever after. Regardless of what you come home with, there is a reintegration process that is a challenge for everybody, even the strongest, even the most well versed people. Um, and that can be, you can see changes in the kids at school. And I think again, it just goes to offering grace, offering a safe space for them if you know the kid well enough, having them in your classroom day in and day out, you kind of know and get a good read on when they just might need a breather or when they just might need some grace. And I think, again, it's like you would with any other kid in any other situation. Just being aware, being alert, knowing when something is a little bit off. And again, not hesitating to reach out to the parent that you've been in contact with through the whole time and saying, hey, something's a little off. Is
Hmm.
there something I can do to help? It really circles back around because you're going to have some parents that are going to say, we know like reintegration has been hard, or my husband is really struggling or my wife is really struggling or whatever the situation is. And we're in counseling or we're doing this or we're doing that, and they may say, hey, we've got it, like thanks, just keep rolling along and teach them math. And then there may be some parents that give you something else. Every house is so different. Reintegration is so different for everybody. um, Being back home is so different for everybody. You see the best and the worst and all the things in the middle. So I think again, it's just being aware of the student, knowing your kid, knowing how they have functioned while the parent has been gone, and knowing when something's off, and then knowing when to reach out. I would say don't ever hesitate to reach out to the parent because that was so important for me.
Hmm.
Because the kids, they don't talk. You know, they get in the car, and some days it's like, how was school? And they just blabber out all the things. And some days they get in the car and they don't want to talk.
Hmm.
And if the teacher, sends me a message and says, hey, this happened today and it was really out of character. Or I send them to school and we've struggled to get to school and we get into class. I'm like, that was a terrible day. It's going to be the worst day ever. And the teacher sends me a note that says, hey, we had a great day today. Like Billy was so happy, or, Charlotte was so funny today. And then I'm like, okay, I'm not doing as bad as I thought I was. So
Mm,
sometimes reaching out to the parent to say, hey, it was a good day carries as much as reaching out to the parent to say something's off.
mm. Yeah, that's super important because as educators, administrators tend to reach out when things are wrong,
Right.
so it's not like you typically would see the phone number from the school pop up on the caller ID and you're like, oh, this is going to be great news.
Yeah.
So, as an educator or administrator, changing that paradigm by reaching out when things are good is a really encouraging way for the parent who's trying to do everything all the time to say, hey, okay, I've got part of this.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah. We
encouragement is really
survived today.
powerful. Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Today I get a
Okay.
stick.
Any final thoughts of, well, any like, well, let me ask you this. So go back in time, your kids are just going into school and they, the deployment started early when your oldest was, just a young baby, but um, any other words of encouragement that you'd give an educator that may have students that their families are in the military that you want them to just really walk away with? Any closing thoughts?
Yeah. I guess my closing thought would be, right after 9/11, there was so much support. In those initial deployments, there was so much support. There were people coming out of the woodwork to support the families and love on those families and do things for those families. And we are, now 23 years down the road. And just like anything else, lives have gone back to normal, and there are still people that are still deployed. And it is still just as important today as it was right after 9/11, when everybody felt that patriotism and everybody wanted to do something. And I would say to the educators, it is such a privilege to have that kid in your class. It is a privilege to have this person who is really supporting his country and sacrificing for his or her country just as much as the parent that is serving is, just as much as the parent that is deployed. So take that kid and find something really unique about them and hone it and grow it in that time you have with them, because the reality is you have our kids as much, if not more, than we do.
Mm,
Our teachers got 8 hours a day with our kids. I got my kids in the car and then we went on to soccer or to dance or to whatever was the night. And then it was home, dinner, bath, bed, and then we started all over again. So really the educators are more hands-on and have their eyes on our kids more than we do. So take that kid, find something unique in that kid that is just really special, and give that to that kid to grow and to work on. And when their parent comes home and they're like, "Oh my goodness, like look at
mm,
the artist that he's become," or,
mm,
she's really come out of her shell with public speaking. She used to not speak to anybody. That gives them something to be proud of and something that they have learned and worked on while their parent has been gone.
that's good. All right. Well, this has been packed with advice, and thank you for giving your time so
You are
that we can
welcome.
get
Thanks
this
for asking
information
me.
out so that educators and administrators can best support students who are from military families, either near a base, deployed overseas, or off base, but in regular communities.